Marcus Williams stepped out of his cramped apartment building on Maple Street, feeling particularly irritated that Tuesday morning. The unemployment checks barely covered his rent and cigarettes, and another rejection letter from a potential employer had arrived yesterday. At 32 years old, Marcus had developed a habit of taking his frustrations out on anything weaker than himself, and today would be no different. The autumn air carried the smell of garbage from the overflowing dumpsters behind the rundown apartment complex. Marcus lit his first cigarette of the day and began walking toward the corner store, his worn sneakers scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. As he passed the small neighborhood park, something caught his attention that immediately sparked his interest. 3 dogs were scattered around the area near some garbage cans, clearly strays based on their matted fur and cautious movements. Marcus felt a familiar cruel excitement building in his chest. These animals represented the perfect opportunity for some entertainment, something to break up another boring day of having nothing productive to do with his time. The first dog he noticed was a golden retriever mix, probably once beautiful but now dirty and thin from life on the streets. The poor animal was desperately searching through scattered trash, looking for any scraps of food it could find. Its ribs were visible through its dull coat, and its eyes held the wary look of an animal that had learned not to trust humans easily. Second dog was smaller, a terrier mix with one ear that stood up while the other flopped down. This little dog stayed closer to the shadows, more nervous than the others, constantly looking around as if expecting danger. Its small size made it appear even more vulnerable, and Marcus could see it limping slightly on its back left leg. Third dog was the largest of the group, a German Shepherd cross with intelligent dark eyes and a noble bearing despite its current circumstances. This dog carried itself with more confidence than the others, but Marcus could see old scars on its muzzle and legs that suggested a difficult past. The dog seemed to be watching over the other two, positioning itself protectively between them. And any potential threats. Marcus felt his pulse quicken with anticipation. He had discovered long ago that hurting defenseless creatures gave him a sense of power and control that was missing from every other aspect of his disappointing life. When his boss had fired him from the warehouse job, when his girlfriend had left him for someone with better prospects, when his own family had stopped returning his calls, Marcus had felt completely powerless. But animals, especially stray animals with no owners to protect them, they were different. They were perfect victims for his anger and frustration. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Marcus picked up a sturdy stick from the ground near the park entrance. The wood felt good in his hands, solid and useful for what he had planned. He tested its weight, swinging it through the air a few times to get a feel for it. The dogs had not yet noticed him, too focused on their desperate search for food to pay attention to the approaching danger. Marcus approached slowly at first, not wanting to spook them into running away before he could have his fun. The golden retriever looked up first, its tail giving a hesitant wag as if hoping this human might be kind enough to offer food or at least leave them alone. This hopeful response only made Marcus more excited about what he was planning to do. Without warning, Marcus lunged forward with the stick, swinging it toward the golden retriever. The dog yelped in surprise and pain as the wood connected with its side, sending it scrambling backward toward the garbage cans. Marcus laughed at the sound, a harsh and ugly noise that echoed off the nearby buildings. The smaller terrier immediately began running, its injured leg making its escape clumsy and painful to watch. But Marcus was faster, and he managed to catch up with the little dog near a chain-link fence. He raised his foot and kicked hard, connecting with the terrified animal's ribs. The dog let out a high-pitched whine that only encouraged Marcus to continue his attack, but it was the German Shepherd that drew most of Marcus's attention. Unlike the other two dogs, this one did not immediately run. Instead, it stood its ground for a moment, as if debating whether to fight back or flee. This brief show of defiance infuriated Marcus more than anything else could have. How dare this mangy street dog show any kind of backbone when he was trying to teach it a lesson about its place in the world? Marcus cornered the German Shepherd near the fence, using the stick to block its escape routes while he moved in closer. The dog finally showed fear, lowering itself to the ground and whimpering softly. This submissive posture was exactly what Marcus wanted to see. He dropped the stick and began using his feet instead, delivering several harsh kicks to the animals. Side and back, each kick sent waves of satisfaction through Marcus's body. Here was something he could control completely, something that could not fire him or leave him or disappoint him. The dog's pain was his power, and for these few minutes, Marcus felt like he mattered in the world. The animal's whimpers were music to his ears, proof that he was having an effect, that his actions had consequences. What Marcus did not know was that across the street, parked in the shadows between two larger vehicles, sat a black Range Rover with heavily tinted windows. The expensive SUV looked out of place in this run-down neighborhood, but it had been sitting there for several minutes while its occupant finished an important phone call. Inside that vehicle sat Jason Statham, the famous action movie star known for playing tough guys who always fought for justice. Jason had grown up in this very neighborhood before his acting career had taken off, and he occasionally returned to visit the places of his childhood. Today he had stopped here to take a private phone call with his agent about his next film project. Jason had been only half paying attention to the street outside until movement in the park caught his eye. At first he thought he was seeing some kids playing with their pets, but as he watched more carefully, his expression began to change. What he was witnessing was not play at all. It was deliberate, calculated cruelty being inflicted on defenseless animals. As Jason watched in growing horror, he realized something that made his blood run cold. Those were not just random stray dogs being abused by this pathetic excuse for a human being. Those were his dogs. Rex, Luna, and Buster had somehow escaped from his property where he was staying during his break from filming. He had rescued all three of them from terrible situations, spending months helping them recover from previous abuse and neglect. Jason ended his phone call immediately and sat in his car for a moment, watching as Marcus continued his vicious attack on Rex, the German Shepherd who had already survived dogfighting rings before Jason had saved him. The sight of his beloved pets being hurt again after everything they had already endured filled Jason with a rage unlike anything he had ever felt. Even during his most intense action scenes, the famous actor's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. This was not going to stand. This coward who found entertainment in hurting innocent creatures was about to learn what real consequences looked like. Jason Statham was about to deliver some very personal justice. Jason Statham opened the driver door of his Range Rover with deliberate control, every movement precise and calculated like the action hero he portrayed on screen. But this was not acting. This was real life, and the fury burning in his chest was genuine. He had watched enough. The man across the street was still tormenting Rex, completely unaware that he was about to face consequences he never could have imagined. The famous actor stepped onto the cracked pavement, his expensive leather boots making soft sounds against the concrete. Jason was dressed casually in dark jeans and a black sweater, but his presence commanded attention even when he was not trying. At 48 years old, he maintained the physical condition that had made him one of Hollywood's most convincing action stars. Every muscle in his body was coiled with controlled anger as he began walking across the street. Marcus was so absorbed in his cruel entertainment that he did not hear the approaching footsteps. He was laughing as Rex cowered against the fence. The poor dog's brown eyes filled with confusion and pain. The German Shepherd had been making such good progress in trusting humans again after Jason had rescued him from the fighting ring. Now this monster was undoing months of careful rehabilitation in just a few minutes of senseless violence. The golden retriever, Luna, had retreated to a safe distance but had not run away completely. She was watching the scene with worried eyes, her maternal instincts making her reluctant to abandon the other dogs, even though she was scared. Buster the terrier was hiding behind a garbage can, his small body trembling with fear as he nursed the pain from Marcus's kick. Jason continued his approach, his famous gray eyes locked on the man who was hurting his family, because that was what these dogs were to him. Not just pets, but family members who had been through hell before finding safety and love in his home. Rex had nightmares for months. After being rescued, waking up whimpering from dreams of the fighting ring. Luna had been so malnourished from the puppy mill that she nearly died 3 times during her recovery. Buster had been so starved by his previous owners that he hoarded food for weeks after Jason brought him home. The shadow fell across Marcus just as he was preparing to deliver another kick to Rex. Something made him look up, perhaps some instinct. That told him he was no longer alone with his victims. When Marcus raised his eyes, he found himself staring directly into the face of Jason Statham, one of the most recognizable action stars in the world. For a moment, Marcus thought he was hallucinating. This could not be happening. Jason Statham could not be standing 10 feet away from him in this run-down neighborhood, catching him in the act of abusing animals. The actor looked exactly like he did in movies, but there was something different about his expression. In films, Jason played tough guys who were usually the heroes. The look on his face now was not heroic. It was dangerous. Having yourself a good time there, Jason said, his voice carrying that distinctive gravelly tone that had made him famous around the world. But there was no warmth in it now, no hint of the charm he sometimes showed in interviews. This was the voice of a man who was very close to losing his temper completely. Marcus stood frozen with his foot still raised, the stick clutched in his sweaty hand. His brain struggled to process what was happening. This had to be some kind of mistake. Famous movie stars did not just appear in neighborhoods like this one. They certainly did not catch random people abusing stray dogs. Yet here was Jason Statham, looking at him with eyes that promised serious trouble. Marcus began, his voice cracking with nervousness. He could not finish the sentence because there was no good way to explain what he had been doing. No excuse that would make sense to anyone, especially not to the man standing before him. Just what? Jason interrupted, taking another step closer. Just having some fun with defenseless animals. Just entertaining yourself by hurting creatures that cannot fight back. Just being the kind of pathetic coward who gets his kicks from causing pain to innocent beings. With each word, Jason moved closer, and Marcus could see the controlled rage building behind those famous eyes. This was not the smooth-talking action hero from the movies. This was a man who was genuinely angry, and Marcus was beginning to realize that he might be in serious trouble. "Those dogs you have been kicking around like toys," Jason continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "They belong to me. Every single one of them is mine, and you have been torturing my family for your own sick amusement." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow to the stomach. He looked at the 3 dogs who were now moving toward Jason with their tails wagging despite their recent trauma. Rex limped over to the actor and pressed against his leg, seeking comfort and protection. Luna emerged from her hiding spot and sat beside Jason's other leg, looking up at him with obvious relief. Even little Buster came out from behind the garbage can, his fear replaced by joy at seeing his human protector. Jason reached down and gently stroked Rex's head, his touch infinitely tender compared to the harsh treatment the dog had just received from Marcus. The contrast was stark and made Marcus feel even smaller and more pathetic than he already did. "Rex here," Jason said, his hand still moving soothingly over the German shepherd's fur, "was rescued from a dog-fighting ring, where men like you thought it was entertaining to watch him get torn apart for money. Luna was saved from a puppy mill, where she was bred over and over until she was nearly dead from exhaustion and malnutrition. Buster was starved by his previous owners until he was just skin and bones when I found him. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized the full extent of what he had done. These were not just random stray dogs. They were rescued animals with traumatic histories, and he had been adding to their suffering for his own twisted pleasure. "I have spent 2 years helping them recover from abuse," Jason continued, his voice still deadly calm, but with an undertone that promised consequences. 2 years of patience, veterinary bills, training, and love to help them learn to trust humans again. And you just undid months of progress in 5 minutes because you thought it would be fun. Marcus tried to back away, but he was already pressed against the fence with nowhere to go. Jason did not need to raise his voice or make threats. His presence alone was intimidating enough, but the knowledge that he had hurt this man's beloved pets made everything so much worse that people had begun to notice the commotion. A small crowd was gathering at a respectful distance, cell phones appearing as people recognized the famous actor. But Jason paid no attention to the growing audience. His focus was entirely on the coward who had been hurting his dogs. "Please," Marcus finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper, "I did not know they were yours. I was just having some fun. They are just dogs." The moment those words left his mouth, Marcus knew he had made a terrible mistake. Jason's expression darkened even further, and the 3 dogs seemed to sense their owner's growing anger. The words "they are just dogs" hung in the air like poison. Jason Statham felt something shift inside him, a cold fury that went deeper than anything he had ever portrayed in his action movies. His jaw tightened as he stared at Marcus, who was still pressed against the fence holding that stupid stick in his trembling hands. "Just dogs," Jason repeated slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow sounded more threatening than any shout could have been. "Just dogs, let me tell you something about these just dogs, you worthless piece of garbage." The small crowd of onlookers had grown larger, with people pulling out their phones to record what was clearly going to be an unforgettable confrontation. Some recognized Jason immediately and were whispering excitedly to their friends, but most were simply drawn by the tension in the air. Even from a distance, everyone could sense that something serious was about to happen. Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out his own phone, holding it up so Marcus could see it clearly. "You see this phone," Jason said, his thumb hovering over the camera app. "I have 40 million followers across all my social media accounts. 40 million people who pay attention to everything I post. When I share something, it goes viral within hours. The whole world sees it." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as he realized what Jason was suggesting. Being exposed as an animal abuser to millions of people would destroy what little life he had left. No one would hire him, no one would rent to him, no one would want anything to do with him if Jason Statham told the world what kind of person he really was. "What is your name?" Jason demanded, already starting to record video on his phone. The camera was pointed directly at Marcus, capturing his face clearly in the afternoon light. "Marcus," he stammered, "Marcus Williams." "Well, Marcus Williams," Jason continued, still recording, "you are going to do exactly what I tell you to do. If you refuse, or if you try to run away, or if you give me any trouble at all, this video of you abusing innocent animals is going to be posted to every social media platform I have accounts on. And trust me, when Jason Statham posts something, the whole world pays attention." Rex was still pressed against Jason's leg, seeking comfort after his traumatic experience. The German shepherd kept glancing nervously at Marcus, his body language showing that he was ready to run if the cruel man made any sudden movements. Luna had positioned herself protectively between Buster and Marcus, her maternal instincts making her want to shield the smaller dog from any further harm. Jason looked down at his 3 rescued dogs, each one representing a story of survival against terrible odds. Rex had been forced to fight other dogs for the entertainment of gambling crowds until animal control had raided the operation. The scars on his muzzle and legs were permanent reminders of the hell he had endured before Jason found him at the rescue shelter. Luna had been kept in a tiny cage at a puppy mill, forced to have litter after litter of puppies that were sold, while she grew weaker and sicker. By the time authorities shut down the operation, she was so malnourished that the veterinarian had not expected her to survive her first week in rescue care. Jason had paid for months of expensive medical treatment to nurse her back to health. Buster had been found tied to a tree in someone's backyard, so thin that his ribs showed through his matted fur. His previous owners had apparently decided they no longer wanted a dog, but had been too lazy to take him to a shelter. They had simply stopped feeding him and left him to die slowly in their yard. A neighbor had finally called animal control, but Buster had been hours away from death when they found him. "These just dogs," Jason said, his voice heavy with sarcasm as he gestured toward Rex. "Luna and Buster have more courage, loyalty, and honor than you will ever possess in your entire miserable life. They have survived things that would break most humans, and they still have the capacity to trust and love despite everything they have been through." Marcus tried to speak, but Jason held up his hand for silence. "I am not finished talking," the actor continued. "These animals have given me more joy and companionship than most people ever will. They ask for nothing except food, shelter, and basic kindness. They do not judge me for my past mistakes. They do not care how much money I make or what movies I appear in. They love unconditionally, and they deserve to be protected from pieces of garbage like you." The crowd was growing larger by the minute, with people stopping their cars to see what was happening. Someone had clearly posted about the situation on social media, because people were arriving who had not been in the area originally. Everyone wanted to see Jason Statham in person, but they were also fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. Jason noticed the growing attention, but did not care about maintaining his public image right now. This was about justice for his dogs, not about protecting his reputation or avoiding bad publicity. Sometimes doing the right thing was more important than worrying about how it might look to other people. "Here is what is going to happen," Jason announced, still recording Marcus on his phone. "First, you are going to get down on your hands and knees and apologize to each one of these dogs individually. You are going to look them in the eyes and tell them you are sorry for hurting them." Marcus looked around desperately, hoping for some way to escape this humiliating situation. But he was surrounded by curious onlookers, trapped against the fence, and facing a man who clearly had the power to destroy his life with a single social media post. "I cannot do that," Marcus protested weakly. "People are watching. This is embarrassing." "Embarrassing," Jason repeated, his voice rising slightly for the first time. "You think apologizing to innocent animals you abused is embarrassing? You know what should be embarrassing? Being a grown man who gets his entertainment from hurting defenseless creatures. Being so pathetic that you need to kick dogs to feel powerful. Being the kind of person who thinks causing pain is fun." The crowd murmured in agreement, clearly on Jason's side in this confrontation. Several people were recording their own videos, and Marcus realized that this scene was probably already being shared online, regardless of what Jason decided to do with his footage. "Get down on your knees," Jason ordered, his voice returning to that deadly calm tone. "Right now. Or I start posting videos and you become famous for all the wrong reasons." Marcus looked at the three dogs, then at Jason, then at the crowd of people watching his every move. He realized he had no choice. His life as he knew it was over unless he did exactly what this famous actor demanded. Slowly, reluctantly, he dropped to his knees on the dirty pavement. "Now crawl over to Rex," Jason instructed, keeping his phone camera focused on Marcus's humiliated face, "and tell him you are sorry for kicking him." Marcus crawled across the dirty pavement on his hands and knees, feeling the rough concrete scraping against his skin through his worn jeans. The humiliation burned in his chest as dozens of people watched him with their phones raised, recording every moment of his degradation. But the alternative was worse. Jason Statham had made it clear that refusing meant becoming internet famous as an animal abuser, and Marcus knew his life would be completely destroyed if that happened. Rex backed away nervously as Marcus approached. The German shepherd's dark eyes filled with confusion and fear. The poor dog had been through so much trauma in his life, and this strange situation was clearly stressing him out. Jason noticed his pet's discomfort and moved closer, positioning himself protectively near Rex while still keeping his phone camera focused on Marcus. "Go ahead," Jason said coldly. "Tell Rex you are sorry for kicking him. Look him in the eyes and apologize for hurting an innocent animal who never did anything to deserve your abuse." Marcus felt his face burning with shame as he looked up at the German shepherd. The dog's intelligent eyes seemed to be studying him, trying to understand why this human had hurt him and what was happening now. It was clear that Rex was a gentle soul despite his size and strength, the kind of dog who would rather run away than fight back against cruelty. "I am sorry, Rex," Marcus mumbled, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. His voice cracked with emotion, though whether it was genuine remorse or just embarrassment was unclear even to himself. "Louder," Jason demanded. "Everyone here needs to hear. You apologized properly to the animal you abused for your own entertainment." "I am sorry, Rex," Marcus repeated, his voice stronger this time. "I am sorry for kicking you and hurting you. You did not deserve that. I was wrong to do that to you." Rex tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand the words. Dogs were incredibly forgiving creatures, and despite everything he had been through, Rex's tail gave a small tentative wag. The gesture of forgiveness from an animal he had just been abusing made Marcus feel even worse about his actions. "Now crawl over to Luna," Jason instructed, pointing toward the golden retriever who was watching the scene with worried eyes. "And give her the same apology." Marcus crawled across the pavement again, his knees already getting sore from the rough concrete. Luna was more trusting than Rex, perhaps because she had been rescued from different circumstances. She did not back away as Marcus approached, but her body language showed she was still nervous about this strange human who had been hurting her friend. "I am sorry, Luna," Marcus said, looking into the golden retriever's gentle brown eyes. "I am sorry for scaring you and hurting you. You are a good dog and you did not deserve to be treated badly." Luna's tail wagged slightly, and she even took a small step closer to Marcus. Her forgiving nature was evident, and it made Marcus realize just how cruel his actions had been. This sweet dog was ready to trust him again, even after he had hurt her, which showed a capacity for forgiveness that Marcus himself had never possessed. "Now Buster," Jason said, gesturing toward the small terrier who was still partially hidden behind the garbage can. "And this apology better be good, because he is the one you seem to enjoy kicking the most." Buster was clearly the most frightened of the three dogs, his small body trembling as Marcus crawled toward him. The little terrier had obviously been through terrible experiences with humans before Jason rescued him, and this confrontation was bringing back traumatic memories. Marcus had to move very slowly and speak very softly to avoid sending Buster running away in terror. "I am really sorry, Buster," Marcus said, his voice gentler than it had been with the other two dogs. Something about the terrier's obvious fear made Marcus feel genuinely bad for the first time since this whole situation had started. "I know you are scared, and I made it worse by being mean to you. You are a brave little dog, and I should not have hurt you." Buster's tail gave the tiniest wag, though he remained ready to run if Marcus made any sudden movements. Even this small gesture of potential forgiveness from the dog he had kicked made Marcus feel a strange emotion he was not used to experiencing. It might have been actual guilt. Jason watched the entire apology process with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. Seeing Marcus humiliated was gratifying, but it did not undo the trauma his dogs had just experienced. Rex, Luna, And Buster would probably be nervous around strangers for weeks after this incident, undoing months of progress in their recovery from previous abuse. "Stand up," Jason ordered once Marcus had finished apologizing to all 3 dogs. "But stay exactly where you are. We are not finished here by a long shot." Marcus struggled to his feet, his knees aching from crawling on the concrete. He brushed dirt off his jeans and looked around at the crowd of people who were still recording everything on their phones. By now there had to be dozens of videos of his humiliation spreading across social media platforms. His life was probably already ruined even if Jason decided not to post his own footage. "Now you are going to confess," Jason continued, still recording. "You are going to look directly into this camera and tell everyone exactly what you did and why it was wrong. And you better make it convincing, because if I think you are not being sincere, this video goes public immediately." Marcus stared at the phone camera, knowing that his next words would determine his future. He could see his own reflection in the black screen, and he looked pathetic. His hair was messy, his face was dirty from crawling on the ground, and his eyes showed the fear of a man who knew he was completely at someone else's mercy. "My name is Marcus Williams," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I was just caught abusing 3 innocent dogs that belonged to Jason Statham. I was kicking them and hitting them with a stick because I thought it was fun. I was wrong. It was cruel and cowardly, and these dogs did not deserve to be hurt by me." "Keep going," Jason prompted. "Tell them why you did it." Marcus swallowed hard, struggling to find words that would explain his inexcusable behavior. "I was angry about my life, and I took it out on defenseless animals, because I am a coward who picks on creatures that cannot fight back. I hurt innocent dogs because it made me feel powerful, and that makes me a terrible person." The crowd was listening intently, many of them shaking their heads in disgust at Marcus's confession. It was clear that public opinion was completely against him, and that his reputation in the neighborhood was destroyed regardless of what happened next. But Jason was not finished with him yet. The real consequences were just beginning, and Marcus was about to learn that apologizing was only the first step in making things right. "You think saying sorry fixes everything," Jason said, his voice still cold with anger. "You think a few words can undo the trauma you just caused to animals that have already suffered enough. Well, let me tell you something, Marcus Williams. Sorry is just the beginning of what you owe these dogs and every other animal in this world." Jason Statham looked at Marcus with the same intensity he had used to stare down villains in countless action movies. But this was real life, and the stakes were much more personal. The 3 dogs had moved closer to their owner, seeking comfort. After their traumatic experience, Rex pressed against Jason's leg, while Luna sat beside him, and little Buster stayed close enough to feel protected, but far enough to run if needed. "Apologizing is just the beginning," Jason said, his phone still recording Marcus's humiliated face. "You are going to make real changes in your life to prove that you understand how wrong your actions were today. And I am going to make sure you follow through on every single thing I tell you to do." Marcus nodded frantically, agreeing to anything that might prevent Jason from posting the video to his millions of followers. He had no idea what the famous actor had planned for him, but it had to be better than becoming internet famous as an animal abuser. At least he hoped it would be better. "First," Jason continued, "you are going to volunteer at the Sunny Meadows Animal Shelter on Oak Street. 20 hours every week for the next 6 months. You are going to learn what it means to care for animals instead of hurting them. The shelter director is a friend of mine named Sarah Chun, and she will be expecting you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." The crowd murmured approvingly at this punishment. Making an animal abuser work at an animal shelter seemed like perfect justice to most of the people watching. Several people were still recording on their phones, and Marcus realized this story was probably already spreading across social media, even without Jason posting his official version. "But that is not all," Jason added, his voice growing even more serious. You are also going to donate money to animal rescue organizations. Half of whatever income you receive each month, whether it is from unemployment benefits, odd jobs, or eventually a real job, goes to helping animals. I will be checking on this regularly, and if you miss even one payment, my video goes public immediately. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized how much this was going to cost him. Half his income was almost everything he had to live on. But looking at Jason's determined expression and remembering the 40 million followers who would see his shame if he refused, Marcus knew he had no choice but to agree. "How will you check?" Marcus asked nervously. "I mean, how will you know if I am really donating the money?" Jason smiled for the first time since this confrontation had started, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that movie villains gave before revealing their master plan. "I have resources you cannot imagine," Jason replied. "Private investigators, accountants, lawyers, and friends in every industry. Tracking your income and donations will be easier than you think. Plus, I will be getting regular reports from Sarah at the animal shelter about your volunteer work. If you miss a single day without a good excuse, if you show up late, if you are rude to the staff or rough with the animals, I will know about it within hours." The crowd was fascinated by this real-life drama playing out before them. Many people had pulled up Jason Statham's social media accounts on their phones and were showing each other his massive follower counts. Everyone understood that this man had the power to make Marcus's life very difficult if he chose to do so. "There is one more thing," Jason said, holding up his phone to make sure Marcus could see it clearly. "You are going to give me your phone number, your address, and your email. I am going to check in with you personally every month to make sure you are keeping up with your obligations. And if I ever hear about you hurting another animal, not only will I post this video, but I will make it my personal mission to make sure everyone in the world knows what kind of person you really are." Marcus rattled off his contact information while Jason entered it into his phone. The actor's fingers moved quickly across the screen, probably already setting up reminders to follow through on his threats. Marcus had never felt so completely under someone else's control in his entire life. 6 months later, Marcus Williams was working at the Sunny Meadows Animal Shelter, just as Jason had demanded. What had started as a punishment had slowly transformed into something unexpected. Marcus found himself arriving early most days and staying late to help with evening feedings. Sarah Chun, the shelter director, had been skeptical at first when Jason Statham personally delivered this reluctant volunteer to her door. "He abused my dogs," Jason had explained to Sarah. "But I think people can change if they are given the right motivation. Give him the hardest jobs, the most difficult animals, and do not let him get away with anything. If he gives you any trouble at all, call me immediately." For the first few weeks, Marcus had been resentful and afraid. He did his required hours and nothing more, counting down the days until his sentence would be finished. He was terrified of the larger dogs and uncomfortable around the cats. Several times he had considered just running away and starting over in another city, but he knew Jason would find him and make good on his threats. The turning point came when a severely injured pit bull named Hope was brought to the shelter. She had been used in dog fighting and was covered in scars, terrified of any human contact. Most of the volunteers were afraid to work with her because she growled and snapped at anyone who came too close to her cage. But Marcus saw something familiar in Hope's eyes. The same fear and anger that he had carried around for years, the same mistrust of a world that had been cruel and unfair. He started spending extra time near her cage, just sitting quietly and talking softly about nothing important. Slowly, over many weeks, Hope began to trust him. The day Hope finally let Marcus pet her through the cage bars was the day he truly understood what he had done to Rex, Luna, and Buster. This dog had every reason to hate humans, but she had chosen to trust again. Marcus realized that the animals he had abused for fun had shown him more forgiveness than he had ever shown anyone in his own life. Sarah Chun noticed the change in Marcus and mentioned it to Jason during one of his monthly check-in calls. "He is different now," she reported. "He genuinely cares about the animals. I think you might have actually saved him from himself." Jason visited the shelter unannounced one evening to see for himself. He found Marcus gently helping an elderly volunteer bathe a rescued beagle, his movements patient and careful. The cruel laughter that had once accompanied his abuse of animals had been replaced by quiet concentration and obvious compassion. When Marcus noticed Jason watching him, he froze for a moment, remembering that terrible day 6 months earlier. But Jason just nodded approvingly and left without saying a word. Justice had been served, not through punishment alone, but through transformation that made the world a better place for innocent creatures who could not defend themselves. The story had spread across the internet exactly as Jason had planned. But instead of destroying Marcus, it had inspired thousands of people to volunteer at their local animal shelters. Sometimes the best revenge was helping someone become a better person than they ever thought they could be.